Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Now, today is the second day of our literature unit. Again, our featured novel is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And last time we summarized the novel for you. But today, of course, like we always do, we're going to talk about the author himself of this novel. And, of course, as I just said, the author is Nathaniel Hawthorne. So we'll talk a little bit about his history, where he's from, the kind of life he led, and how he came to write our featured novel this month.
This guy's got a little special place in my heart because I went to an elementary school whose name was Hawthorne Elementary School, and it was named after this author. So for me, it's kind of part of my childhood. Hawthorne
Not mine.
Elementary.
I went to Lincoln Elementary School.
Oh, that's a nice name for a school, too.
And then I went to Roosevelt Elementary School. So kind of boring, named after U.S.
Oh, you
presidents.
had both people. No, my high school and junior high were not named after people. But I did have, my Hawthorne Elementary School. Anyway, let's go ahead, guys, read through this, and then we'll be back to talk about some of his other works and also some of his background, how he grew up, things like that. I love reading about people's biographies, Okay, let's get started. American author Nathaniel Hawthorne was born in 1804 in Salem, Massachusetts. His ancestors, the Hathorns, were some of the original settlers of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Hawthorne added the W to his name to distance himself from his ancestors' involvement in the infamous Salem witch trials, in which 25 people were executed, despite flimsy evidence against them. Hawthorne graduated from Bowdoin College in 1825. Some of his school friends included famous poet-to-be Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and Franklin Pierce, who would become the U.S.'s 14th president. Throughout his life, Hawthorne worked as an editor and a government customs surveyor. In 1837, he published a collection of short stories, Twice Told Tales. It received excellent reviews from Longfellow and author Edgar Allan Poe. Hawthorne later became influenced by the transcendentalist philosophies of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. They believed that organized religion had corrupted people and that the best way to find God was through self-reliance. Hawthorne lived in a transcendentalist community, Brook Farm, for part of 1841. He later wrote about his experience there in his 1852 novel, The Blithedale Romance. Hawthorne married Sophia Peabody in 1842, and the couple had 3 children. Later on, he produced his best-known novels, The Scarlet Letter, 1850, and The House of Seven Gables, 1851. In 1852, he published The Life of Franklin Pierce, a biography of his friend. President Pierce rewarded Hawthorne by appointing him as U.S. consul in Liverpool, England. The Hawthorne family spent the next 7 years in Europe. Hawthorne died in 1864 after a long illness. His funeral was attended by many prominent authors of his time. He is acclaimed as one of the foremost American writers, and his works are still widely read today.
Okay, everybody, it's time for us to discuss today's lesson. We're talking about the actual author of our featured novel, The Scarlet Letter, and his name, of course, was Nathaniel Hawthorne. He's an American author, and he was born way back in 1804 in Salem, Massachusetts. Of course, you know Massachusetts. That's the state that has Harvard University, the city of Boston, MIT is there, of course. And his ancestors, the Hathorns, were some of the original settlers of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. That's an old name for Massachusetts when it was a colony of England before it was the state of Massachusetts. It was called the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And, of course, his ancestors were some of the first people to settle in that colony. But at the time, the spelling of their name was different there without the W. So Hawthorne added the W to his name to distance himself from his ancestors' involvement in the infamous Salem witch trials, in which 25 people were executed despite flimsy evidence against them. So, of course, Hawthorne here, his original name did not have a W, but, his ancestors had kind of a shameful history, so he wanted to distance himself from them. If you want to distance yourself from something, that means you don't want people to associate you with that thing. In some ways, maybe you'll change your name. For example, I could say that my ex-sister-in-law wanted to distance herself from my brother because she hated him so much when they got divorced. So she actually changed her name back to her original first marriage name. Her first husband's surname as opposed to my brother who was her second husband. That's kind of a complicated story there, but in any case, she was trying to distance herself from him. She didn't want to have anything to do with him, nor did she want anybody to call her by his name.
So, yeah, I would want to distance myself from ancestors who possibly executed people for being witches with no evidence. I actually took a trip to Salem, Massachusetts with my mom. And there's a big, museum, and you can go on tours there to learn about the witch trials. They're very famous, in America at least. It was a horrible part of history where people were accused of being witches and then they were burned or drowned. It was horrible. So involvement means you're participating in something, so you're involved in it, or you're participating. Involvement, of course, is the noun form of the word. And infamous it does mean famous, guys, but it means famous for doing something bad. So if you see infamous, and you don't say infamous, guys, it's infamous. That's not good. If someone's infamous, yeah, they're famous, but yeah, not for good things. You don't want to ever be infamous. You might want to be famous, but not infamous. So they actually killed or executed 25 people despite or even though they only had very flimsy evidence against them. Flimsy means very weak, unconvincing, probably weren't factual. Executed usually means you are actually killed because someone planned to kill you. Typically, it's because maybe you've committed a crime and maybe you get the death penalty and you're executed that way. But also gangs, like drug gangs and mobs, they will execute people by just having them kneel down and they shoot the back of their heads. That's execution as well. It's an execution.
You could be executed by firing squad, you can be hanged, etc., etc.
You're murdered.
So these people were killed because of crimes, basically, but the evidence was flimsy, which means it wasn't very solid evidence. It could be debated in different ways, and maybe people actually didn't see these things happen. So the evidence was flimsy, but they were executed anyway. So he wanted to distance himself from them because they were bad people. So now we've got Nathaniel Hawthorne with a W, and Hawthorne graduated from Bowdoin College in 1825. That college still exists, by the way.
It does.
It's in the state of Maine now, but back in the day, Maine was still part of Massachusetts. The Massachusetts Bay Colony included the territory, which is now the state of Maine. They're separate now, and that's where he went to college or graduated from university way back in 1825, and some of his school friends included famous poet-to-be Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and Franklin Pierce, who would become the U.S.'s 14th president. Now, notice here that we're talking about a poet, but he's not a poet yet. He was studying to be a poet. This is, of course, Longfellow. and he was the poet to be. So that means he was going to be a poet in the future, but not yet. If you're engaged to be married, but you're not married yet, you can say, oh, this is my wife to be.
My bride to be.
My bride to be, or my, what's the guy? Groom to be, I guess. My husband to be, etc. We're not
Mother
married yet.
to be, you often hear that too.
Right, if you're pregnant, but you haven't given birth yet.
Right.
So, yes, he knew Longfellow in college. Also, he knew Franklin Pierce, who went on to become the 14th president of the United States.
He wasn't a very popular president. You rarely even see this name. So I looked at it and I thought, oh, was he a president? I don't remember him at all. Yeah, he didn't do anything big. Of course, that also could mean he didn't do anything really bad either. But he became the U.S.'s 14th president. So he knew some pretty big names, you could say. Sometimes that happens when you're actually growing up, or maybe you're in college together before anyone's become famous or made a name for themselves. You get to know pretty big people when you're still all not famous. I know some famous people, but before they became famous. So throughout his life, Hawthorne worked as an editor. And a government customs surveyor. When you go through customs, remember, you're trying to move from one country to another country, or maybe you're, I don't know, maybe you're importing some food. That food has to go through customs as well. So an editor, of course, just makes sure someone's writing is in good shape before it's published. So those were a couple of his jobs. In 1837, he published a collection of short stories, and the title of that collection was called Twice Told Tales. So if you publish, guys, it means you have written something that someone actually thinks is pretty good. So they're willing to publish your material. You might have written poems, a novel, I don't know, a comic book. Nowadays, you can self-publish by just putting it up on the internet. But back then, you had to go to a publishing company, a publishing warehouse, a publishing corporation, and you had to get someone to approve your manuscript and say it was good enough to be sold. So that was tough back then.
It was, and of course, when your work of literature is published, people are going to talk about it in newspapers and on the radio and on TV. Of course, back then, they did not have radio and TV or the internet. So, of course, people wrote reviews for it in newspapers, and this particular collection of short stories received excellent reviews from the poet-to-be Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Maybe he was already a poet by that time. And also by Edgar Allan Poe, the writer of The Cask of Amontillado, The Pit and the Pendulum, The Raven, etc., etc. And they were famous writers, and they said, hey, this collection of short stories is really good. You ought to read it. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in our lesson for today. Let's take a break now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenny. 今天我们要继续来看第7单元。好，我们要谈这个文学作品 Scarlet Letter。The Scarlet Letter 红字这本书，我们可能大家都听过，那它的故事内容我们之前也讲完了，但是今天我们要重点放在作者。作者是谁呢？好，我们先看这位作者，我们中文叫霍桑 Hawthorne 这个名字可能您也听过，但是你注意到它的拼字 Hawthorne。好，我们这边就从他的名字讲起。事实上呢，他原来的姓氏是没有 W 的，也就是 Hathorne。那为什么他要把它加上一个 W 呢？因为呢，他想要让他自己跟他的祖先之前的祖先的名字，好像不要混淆，让他有一点点不一样。因为他的祖先之前呢，曾经是恶名昭彰的，有一个女巫案，这个事情其实他心里是有疙瘩的。好，我们看到这里提到了 The infamous Salem Witch Trials， 后面的逗点接着 in which 25 people were executed despite flimsy evidence against them。 那这个神巫案在这个 案子里面有25个人当时被处死，所以我们知道这个 in 是跟着前面的 trials 在一起的。好，我们再来往下读。那提到 Hawthorne 他其实他在学校里面的时候就有一些同学，今天我们都知道他们是名人。其中有一位就是 Poet to be Henry Wadsworth Longfellow。 好，我们继续往下看到这位名人之外，其中他还有一个同学后来就成了美国第14任的总统。好，那说起来这跟他以后事业的发展也是有关系的，因为呢他其实在他人生里面，他几乎就是一直在政府的海关这边当验货员。那而且他也从他的诗人朋友那边获得很高的评价。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, everybody, let's continue with our lesson. Again, we're talking about the life and times of Nathaniel Hawthorne, the author of today's featured work of literature, The Scarlet Letter. Now, here in the next paragraph, it says, Hawthorne later became influenced by the transcendentalist philosophies of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. I know Thoreau wrote Walden Pond there. That's a story of him living next to that pond in Massachusetts there. And we're talking about transcendentalism, which is a kind of philosophy. Transcendentalism is basically 超验主义 in Chinese. I'm not going to define this because, as you know, philosophy can be quite complicated. 哲学 is philosophy. And the two main guys in this particular philosophy were Emerson and Thoreau, and Hawthorne was influenced by them.
Well, I can say a little bit about transcendentalism. It's actually a philosophy that is based more on how you feel about something. Your intuition tells you about something. And it was a reaction to rationalism, which was big back then. This was a more romantic way to live life. Not romantic in terms of love, but you kind of base your philosophy of life on how you feel about things as you think them through and you listen to your inner voice, that sort of thing. Okay. So this was a big social movement back then, as well as a philosophy. And they thought that maybe organized religion actually corrupted people, made people worse. So some of the churches back then had a lot of power. A lot of power over people. I think they had the most power back then in life, anywhere. So I can see why some people would want to get away from that and find their own, their own belief system. So when you are talking about organized religion, you're talking about churches. And if you corrupt something or someone, you take someone that was good and you turn them into a bad thing. So someone can be corrupted perhaps through bad friendships. Maybe you have a really good son and he makes this friend and that friend's not a good kid and they start robbing stores and then they, get arrested, thrown into prison. Your son has been corrupted by his bad friends.
Kind of ruined by them. You could also talk about corruption in governments and things like that. The government officials take bribes and stuff like that. You can't trust them as an example there. But in this particular case, it kind of ruins people. It makes them bad apples when it's supposed to make them good citizens. So they thought that the best way to find God, to find the Almighty, was through self-reliance, relying on yourself and not relying on churches so much. And Hawthorne lived in a transcendentalist community, Brook Farm, for part of 1841. So, yes, in the year 1841, he lived, I guess, on a kind of commune, commune, yes, for transcendentalists. And he later wrote about his experience there in his novel of 1852 called The Blithedale Romance. That's another novel you might consider reading in the future after, of course, you get done reading The Scarlet Letter. Now, let's move on now and talk about his love life here. Hawthorne married Sophia Peabody in 1842, and the couple had 3 children. Okay, so that's who he married, Sophia Peabody. And that was back in the year 1842, and they had 3 children. But here in the next sentence, it says, later on, he produced his best-known novels, The Scarlet Letter in 1850, and The House of the Seven Gables the next year in 1851. Okay, so in 1852, he published another book, The Life of Franklin Pierce, which was not a work of fiction. It was not a novel. It was a biography of his friend that he knew in college. And, of course, as you know, Franklin Pierce later went on to become president of the United States. So if you write a book about a person and it's true, that is a biography. And, of course, if you write a book about yourself, that is an autobiography.
Yeah, that means you write about yourself, autobiography. I love biographies. I think they're my second favorite type of literature, you could say. I love biographies. Anyway, well, he did his friend a favor. He made his friend look good in the biography. So President Pierce turned around and rewarded Hawthorne, gave him a reward by appointing him as U.S. Consul in Liverpool, England. Consul is a position, it's similar to a diplomat, so you're working with the people who are in government in the UK. And you're, exchanging information back and forth between the U.S. and the government there overseas. So that's a pretty fun thing to do. If you get appointed as an ambassador for another country, that's kind of a cool gig. And not everybody has experience in diplomacy when they get that appointment. Sometimes they just know the president. They know the right people. So rewarded means you're given something for doing something. And in this case, he wrote that biography that made his friend look good. So it's some sort of recognition of some effort that you've done or some achievement. You can be rewarded for good grades. Maybe your parents say, if you get straight A's, I will give you an extra $10 this week. Or you could be rewarded, maybe you find someone's wallet and you find the person, you return the wallet and you get a reward. Maybe he gives you a little money or she gives you a little money. And if you appoint someone, it means someone has some power to actually give someone a job. So you're assigned a job or a role by someone else. You're appointed to a position. That usually happens in government.
Right, so he got a presidential appointment to work in Liverpool, England. Of course, that's where the Beatles are from.
Yeah.
And the Hawthorne family spent the next 7 years in Europe.
Nice.
And I guess if you live in England, that counts as living in Europe as
Sure.
well. So here in the next paragraph, it says, Hawthorne died in 1864 after a long illness. So he lived to see the Civil War. When did the Civil War end? In 1863 or something like that? 1865.
Sounds familiar.
I'd have to look it up, but in any case there, he was sick for a long time, so he died after a long illness. And his funeral was attended by many prominent authors of his time. The funeral, of course, is when you say goodbye to someone who has just died. So a lot of famous authors went to that funeral to pay their respects.
And it says, here he is acclaimed as one of the foremost American writers, and his works are still widely read today. If you're acclaimed, you're given praise publicly, you're celebrated for your achievement. Maybe you're a master of something, master artist or master writer in his case. Foremost here is one of the best, right? If you're one of the best of the best. So you have a really high rank or importance in something. Your position is well regarded. One of the foremost American writers. And as I told you, he was so prominent that he was chosen, his name was chosen at least for my elementary school. So there. Right now we're going to listen one more time to our Chinese teacher.
好，我们继续来看The Scarlet Letter 它的作者的故事。那提到 Hawthorne， 他后来呢，当然他成为一个文学家，他成为一个作家的身份，而他也受到不同人的影响，其中一位大家也许也听过 Emerson， 还有一位那就是 Thoreau。 这两位呢，其实都是属于什么呢？属于超验主义者这样子的哲学体系的倡导人。而这个字 Transcendentalist 就是所谓的超验主义者。好，那他们信仰什么呢？下面就解释给大家听。他们相信说，这个制度性的宗教是会让人心腐败的，还有你要找到神，其实最好的方式就从哪里开始？ Self-reliance， 就是要靠自己。好，那我们再来看Hawthorne 呢，他其实呢，他在某一个社区叫布鲁克农场，他住了一段时间，然后他就写成了1852年这本小说叫做《伏古传奇》。好，那我们继续往下看哦。其实 Hawthorne 他结婚之后，他1842年结婚之后呢，他育有3名子女。当然这之后就是出现了他最有名的这一本小说 The Scarlet Letter， 出版的时间是1850年。可是也许你还听过另外一个也是一样很有名的The House of the Seven Gables。 这个书之后呢，他记得他有一个朋友当总统吗？他还帮这位朋友写了他的传记。然后呢，这位总统就命他为英格兰利物浦的美国领事。好，看到这里，我们先看一个文法概念，就是 appoint him as U.S. Consul。 在这里 appoint 我们知道它本来的意思就代表指派任派谁做什么官位， appoint somebody as 后面加职位，好，就是任命谁做什么事。再来我们谈到 Hawthorne 他的事业发展到这里，那接下来呢，其实就是他的晚年了。他在生病之后呢，从1864年他就过世了。然后呢，这时候他这些在世的时候重要的人士作者都来参加的丧礼，而且他也被誉为是最重要的美国作家之一。好，我们来看这个片语 He is acclaimed as one of the foremost American writers. Be acclaimed as， 我们提到 as 这个字常常后面就加角色，加一个身份，所以呢，他被誉为是什么样的角色跟身份呢？美国最重要的作家之一。好，我们今天的讲解就到这边结束，我们下次见。
That is it for today's lesson, but please join us next time when we continue to talk about the Scarlet Letter. We'll go back to this story and talk about some of the themes and ideas, and it should be of great interest to you. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.